Happy Sunday and welcome to your weekly news recap. I'm Gabriela Perez and here are the top stories of the week. Kicking off the week with some conflicting news. There's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. Here's what we know. The initial attack that started a retaliation attack from Iran against Israel happened on April 1st, where Israel murdered 8 military officials from an attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, including 2 generals and 6 officers. This attack was in violation of international law. We now know this sparked over 300 drones to be launched towards Israel, most of which were blocked from US and UK weaponry, some via the infamous Iron Dome, a weapon that was granted to Israel from the US that's programmed to measure the trajectory of incoming air attacks and intercept them. Iran's retaliatory attack on Israel did not target civilians. They specifically targeted military bases, however most didn't reach their final destination. That's used to receive US weapon deliveries. Iranian leaders have said that they do not plan further attacks and warned the US of a severe response if they choose to help Israel respond. However, President Biden has already announced that Washington would not participate in any offensive action against Iran, and the president made very clear to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that we do have to think carefully and strategically about risks of escalation. Israel has announced that it will respond to Iran, ignoring Biden's suggestions, meaning we can only brace ourselves and hope this does not cause a global conflict where Israel is dragging in the US, where Russia and the UK can get even more involved. Next, the Supreme Court has abolished the right to mass protest in 3 states. It is no longer safe to organize a protest in Louisiana, Mississippi, or Texas. The lower court ruling has raised concerns over the right to protest as of Monday. Under this ruling, a protest organizer could face severe financial consequences if any attendee commits an illegal act during a protest. While the Supreme Court did not endorse this decision, it also didn't overturn it, leaving it as the law for most of the American South for now. This case revolves around Ray McKesson, a prominent figure in the Black Lives Matter movement who organized a protest in Baton Rouge following the fatal police shooting of Alton Sterling in 2016. Although McKesson wasn't responsible for the violence that happened during the protest, the lower court held him responsible for failing to dissuade protesters who allegedly stole water bottles from a grocery store and for leading the assembled protest onto a public highway in violation of Louisiana criminal law. This decision sets a dangerous precedent, making organizers liable for the actions of participants even if they didn't authorize or start the actions. If organizers can't be penalized for the actions of attendees, it could also stop future protests altogether. Fifth Circuit Judge Don Willett warned that this ruling could empower participants to sabotage protests simply by participating and inciting violence. The Supreme Court's decision not to review the lower court's ruling could be temporary, but for now it stands, posing as a significant threat to the First Amendment's right to protest in these states. Moving on, in the same day, on Monday, protests are erupting all over the United States, calling for a ceasefire from Israel's massacre on Gaza. As part of nationwide protests, hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters are joining together, calling for a permanent ceasefire and pleading the US government to stop providing Israel with more weapons using taxpayer dollars while ignoring the basic necessities of its civilians. Protests are meant to be disruptive, and these protesters are shutting down major highways like the Oakland Freeway on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, shutting down the SeaTac Airport in Washington, and some reaching the Tesla factory in Fremont. As of now, 84 protesters have been arrested from only 3 protests. Adding to that, Columbia student protesters made up 100 new pro-Palestine protesters. Statements from organizers read that politicians are ignoring calls for a permanent ceasefire and are instead continuing to provide aid packages, use billions of taxpayer dollars to arm Israel. They have ignored international law and court rulings and instead are offering Israel complete immunity, although they continue to violate laws like blocking humanitarian aid and targeting hospitals, journalists, and thousands of civilians. All this while Americans are deprived of housing, healthcare, and basic needs. Israel's military campaign against the Palestinians has reached 6 months of atrocities and death tolls surpassing 30,000. And 1 million more facing disease and famine. Ending on an international story, the US has blocked Palestinian representation in the UN. An overwhelming support of 12 votes in favor, only the United States opposed Palestinian United Nations representation and was allowed to veto it. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the devastating war in Israel and Gaza has only made the statehood goal more urgent. The US says allowing the Palestinians to become a full member of the UN would mean recognizing Palestine as an independent state, something the US believes should be discussed between Israel and Palestine regarding a 2-state solution where they both work alongside each other with agreements regarding security and territorial agreements. Washington is often the only one shooting down any proposal seen as critical of Israel and favoring the Palestinians. There was an exemption once last month when the US declined to vote for a UN resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza that Israel opposed. As of now, Palestinians only have partial representation in the United Nations, where they are allowed in meetings but they are not allowed to vote. And that's all for this week. A lot of concerning international news from politics to crime. I look forward to delivering you independent coverage every week. Subscribe and follow my social media pages to catch up on the latest news. I'll see you next week.